Well, good afternoon. Welcome to the Livestock and Poultry Programs AMS Cattle Carcass Training Webinar. My name is Jody Pitcock, and I am with the USDA Agriculture Marketing Service Livestock and Poultry Programs. This webinar here this afternoon is a continuation of a series we hosted earlier in the spring in conjunction with Colorado State University. The Cattle Carcass Training Centers were established in 2019 in order to collaborate with the industry and academia to provide educational and training opportunities to stakeholders interested in the official quality grading of feeder cattle, fed cattle, and beef carcasses in the United States. In addition to CSU, training centers were established at West Texas A&M University and at the USDA Meat Animal Research Center in Clay Center, Nebraska. Tonight's webinar will be recorded and will be available on the AMS website within the coming weeks. You can find recordings and material from our past Cattle Carcass Training Center webinars at that website. Our speakers this afternoon will introduce you to a new Livestock Mandatory Reporting live cattle report and the new USDA Carcass Grading Dashboard. We understand there is tremendous interest right now in how the U.S. cattle chain operates more broadly, but the focus of our presentation is solely on the existing resources USDA manages and provides to the public. We estimate our session will take about 1 hour this afternoon. As participants this afternoon, you are in listen-only mode, but you will have the opportunity to ask questions, and we will answer your questions at the end of each presentation and at the conclusion of our session. Please use the Q&A icon located in your Zoom toolbar to submit your questions. Our speakers will answer as many as time will allow. Now I'd like to introduce this afternoon's first speaker, and then we'll get started. Mr. Jim Burnow is the Chief of the Livestock and Mandatory Reporting with AMS Livestock, Poultry, and Grain Market News. Prior to his current role, Jim served since 2013 as the Deputy Director for the Livestock, Poultry, Grain Market News in Washington, D.C. Before joining AMS in 2001, Jim farmed in northeastern Iowa and was employed by the Iowa Department of Agriculture and Land Stewardship as a federal state livestock auction reporter. Today, Jim will introduce us to the LMR in general and explain a bit how AMS collects the information and uses these reports. Jim, please, we welcome you, and we look forward to hearing your presentation.
Thank you, Jody. Good afternoon, and I want to thank each and every one of you for taking the time to participate in today's event. Market News strives to provide the help and information that the industry needs to complete their daily transactions, whether this is in producing a raw product or creating the items sold to the end user that may be in a retail setting. These reports, formula-based and net price distribution, highlight our mission in livestock, poultry, and grain market news of facilitating the strategic marketing of agricultural products in domestic and international markets while ensuring fair trading practices and promoting a competitive and efficient marketplace. Livestock Mandatory Reporting has been with us for over 20 years now, and we continue to use what we learn in other commodities and apply those learned lessons to all areas of market reporting. The swine industry added a net price distribution to their list of reports and continues to find great value in this information. Creating a new report is an enormous task, from reviewing and compiling the data into a useful format to the actual IT work needed to bring those ideas and wishes to life. While this may sound simple and quick, the time needed to develop and test each and every idea is a slow walk through the information. On the cattle and beef side of livestock mandatory reporting, we receive data from the packers that is submitted to us through a secure site. only visible to the reporters, who are subject matter experts in their field of work. After this information is imported into our system, the reporters may review 25 to 30 records of data each day, and each record contains numerous data points within each line of data. Each data point is important to reporting what is happening in the market on any given day. After completing the data verification process, each report is produced and published on our website. Market News has been reporting markets in the United States for 106 years, and we feel this is a big deal. No other country in the world provides market data to the agricultural industry like we do. Many countries come to us and ask how we can do such a great job of reporting about what is happening in the industry on a daily basis. While many see the information of markets important, we feel it also includes that it sends correct market signals reflecting current supply and demand, allows for contracting or price negotiation based on public information, increases efficiency in the marketplace, it helps farmers and other businesses compete smarter, and helps all participants in the marketing chain with access to the same critical information at the same time. No one does it better than the USDA. I know I've droned on long enough, and everyone is here to listen to our subject matter experts explain these new reports and the new dashboard. I encourage each one of you to contact the Market News subject matter experts if you have any questions about any of our reports, those presented today or those that we have been publishing for the last 20 years. Don't guess on what the answer or question is, but please pick up the phone and talk to an expert. Those listed at the bottom of the reports in the source line. And with that, I ask Sam to post the polling question, and I turn it back to you, Jody.
So if everyone could take a second here and answer the polling question, we'd sure appreciate it. All right, so Sam's going to share the response, and really good that we have about 54% of you out there that's watching have at some time have reached out to Market News office. We want to encourage each and every one of you to reach out to our Market News offices across the country, and especially if you have a particular report that you're interested in, reach out to that reporter and let them answer the questions that you may have. And we sure appreciate everybody participating in the poll. With that, we'll go ahead and move on to our second speaker tonight. If you tuned in to our webinar series back in June, you had the pleasure of hearing from our second speaker already. Mr. Charlie Potts is the Supervisory Market Reporter with the Livestock and Poultry Grain Market News Division. Charlie joined USDA as a meat grader in 2005 after graduating from Kansas State University, and then joined the Market News team in 2009, where he supervises the USDA Livestock Mandatory Reporting, specifically in the live cattle and sheep reports. Today, Charlie will provide an in-depth look at the two new cattle reports released under LMR. Please welcome Charlie Potts.
Well, thank you, Jody, for that introduction. It's great to be here this afternoon to talk about Livestock Mandatory Reporting, or LMR reports. And today I'm going to go over the formula and forward contract base reports, as well as the net price distribution report. But before we get into that, I just want to go over some ways to find these reports. As you can see on my screen, I have the Livestock and Poultry Grain Market News homepage. And if you scroll down here to the bottom, where you get to reports by commodity and click on cattle, it'll give you the option here to look at cattle reports on a national direct slaughter level as well as a regional direct slaughter level. And these will be reports that are gathered through livestock mandatory reporting. These items up here of slaughter cattle summaries and slaughter cattle auctions are not LMR reports, and we won't touch on those today. But when you go to the National Direct Slaughter Cattle Reports, as I've got here on this screen, if you go down to the daily direct national reports, as you can see, I've got highlighted the morning, afternoon, and summary of the formula-based reports. And then on a national level, we also have the weekly formula-based and forward contract reports, as well as the net price distribution report, which is also on a weekly basis. We also have those on a regional basis, and I showed you where to get to those. So that's one way you can explore to look at those reports as well at your own leisure. But moving on, I want to first start with the National Daily Direct Slaughter Cattle Report on the formula base report. This would be a daily summary. So one thing to keep in mind on the formula base and forward contract reports, on a daily basis, only formula based transactions will be reported, and that will be on a national basis. But on a weekly basis, we will report formula based transactions as well as forward contract based transactions, and that will be on a national basis and a regional basis, with every area in the 5-area reporting region having its own individual weekly base report on the formulas and forward contracts. But let me get started here on this report. What I did is I highlighted different parts of this report with different colors, so hopefully it'd be easier to follow along. And one thing to note before we get started is most of these reports are from August the 16th for just educational purposes to understand what these reports are saying. So as you can see in the header up at the top, I've got highlighted in a kind of a purple color where it will give you the head count, week to date head count, same day week ago head count, all the way to same day year ago, as well as same period last year. And what these are head counts of formula-based transactions on a live and dressed basis, depending on the reporting period. So as you can see, there's quite a bit of numbers there, especially when you get into week to date, as well as same period week ago. But moving on down here into the meat and potatoes of the report, as you can tell, these are all formula-based transactions. And I have highlighted here in red up at the top where you can see the total head count of these formula-based transactions, a weighted average dressing percentage, weight range, weighted average weight, price range, and weighted average base price. These are broken up by percent choice. So as you can see here, we have over 80% choice, 65 to 80% choice, and so on. So these are all these transactions for steers, live FOB that fit into that data group. As you can see here on the left-hand side of the screen, I have some data highlighted in yellow and blue. So I just want to touch on that to help explain what these transactions represent. Live FOB means they are bought on a live basis as they're standing there on the hoof, and live FOB means that the packer will be paying the freight from the feed yard to the plant. Live delivered is also on a live basis, but the producer will be paying the freight from the feed yard to the plant. And this also goes for the same on the dress basis. Dress delivered is when the producer is paying the freight from the feed yard to the plant, and dressed FOB is when the packer is paying the freight from the feed yard to the plant. So this is our beef type section. Our class codes that represent the beef types are broken up into steers, heifers, and mixed steer heifers. So these are all beef type cattle, and all this data in here are the transactions that are gathered that fit into those representative groups. One thing to note on the mixed steer heifer class codes, what these are steers and heifers that are fed in a commingled pen to slaughter weight. They're more popular in the north than they are in the south, but that kind of defines what a mixed steer heifer class code is. But after you get through all that data of the beef type class codes, we have a beef type, basically summary here. So all that data I just scrolled through is represented here in this summary section that I've highlighted in red. As you can see, we have a total for your live FOB or live delivered and so forth, whatever your shipment basis is by your head count, your dressing percentages, weight ranges, price ranges, and weighted average base prices. One thing to keep in mind here, all of LMR live cattle transactions do not account for freight. The price that is reported is for the cattle only. So one thing to look at here is just look at our dressed delivered versus our dressed FOB. Those dressed delivered cattle where the producer is paying the freight to the plant generally are much higher than dressed FOB cattle where the packer is paying the freight. So I just wanted to touch on that to kind of help explain what you're looking at here, that these transactions are for the cattle only. We also have a dairy bred and a mixture heifer class codes after we get through the beef type section. But another section I want to touch on here on the daily formula base reports is the regional sections. Now on the regional section, for the daily reports, we'll only have formula dress based transactions. And what this will give you on a regional basis, the Texas, Oklahoma, New Mexico, Kansas, etc. Areas, you'll be able to see the head count, the average weight, and the average formula based price on a dressed basis. So that's a really quick overview of the daily formula based reports. Now I'm going to go to the National Weekly Direct Slaughter Cattle Report for formula base and forward contract purchases. So keep in mind, since this is a weekly report, this will come out Monday mornings and will include both formula base and forward contract based transactions. So our header up here at the top is a little bit different. As you can tell, I've got an orange highlighted where you'll have the dressed head count, the live head count, the total for a week ago, as well as the total for a year ago. And this is broken up by or purchase type, excuse me, as in formula based and forward contract based transactions. So as we get down here into the formula based part of the report, this will be the exact same format as the daily report we just looked at. These are all formula-based transactions, although they're on a weekly basis, so we'll have more information than on a daily report. These are formula-based transactions that have been, the base price has been locked in and reported to LMR. So I'll scroll down here to our beef type summary on the formula-based transactions. Some feedback we've gotten from these reports already is just how surprised people were at the amount of dressed FOB formula-based transactions. And I'll be honest, as a negotiated cash market reporter for several years, I'm not used to seeing that many dressed FOB transactions, but obviously being a different marketing style, the dressed FOB transactions are much higher than other marketing channels. So I'm going to scroll down here to the second part of this weekly report where we'll get into the forward contract based transactions. So one thing you need to keep in mind that these forward contract bases are generally based off the CME and are being reported to us once the base price is locked in. So when that producer decides to execute his base price, and gets in touch with that the packer and says, you know, lock my cattle in at this price, generally based off the CME. That's what these transactions are. These are the starting point of a forward contract transaction. And generally these cattle are based off of CME contracts further down the road. Most of these cattle won't even be harvested yet. So I've got some prices highlighted here. As you can see, we got some steers live delivered at $1.40 or some dress delivered steers bumping up against $2.24. Obviously, with the current cash market, those prices look very, very attractive compared to where we are at right now. But they line right up with the deferred CME cattle contracts, which is generally what they are being based off of. Now, this forward contract base section, it has the same format as the formula-based transactions, and we have a beef type section here that's a summary. And one thing that we've noticed already in just the short time we've been releasing these reports is generally there are more cattle that are sold on a delivered basis than on an FOB basis on forward contracts. Not necessarily here in this example, but in the reports we've seen so far. And this has the same format as your formula basis, where you have a head count, price ranges, some weighted average, dressing percentage, weights, price ranges, as well as a weighted average forward contract based price. So this bottom section, the regional section, will be a little bit different than the daily section. In the regional section on the weekly report here, we will have formula base regional data on a dressed and live basis, as well as forward contracts on a dressed and live basis. And I have highlighted here some southern plains areas in red and northern feeding regions kind of in the purple color, just to show that there are some price differences on these formula-based transactions. As you can see, there's quite a bit of little real estate there between the prices in the south versus the north, as well as one aspect that you should use to your advantage here is being able to see the week ago price compared to the current price. So you can see where that price trend is headed compared to last week, whether it be on formula-based transactions or forward contract based transactions. So here are the formula-based live transactions. These will be the same as the dress transactions, and as well as the same for the forward contracts based transactions on a regional basis. So what are some takeaways of the formula base and forward contract base reporting? Well, it gives you a starting point for the formula transactions as well as the forward contract transactions. It also shows a relationship between formula transactions and negotiated cash. As I mentioned before, working the negotiated cash desk for several years, you can definitely see the correlation in these reports of the formula market following the negotiated cash market, as a large majority of those purchases are based off of negotiated cash transactions. It also shows regional differences in formula-based prices, where you can see what your neighboring state may be getting for some of these purchase types. And lastly, it increases price transparency for stakeholders that utilize the formula marketing channels, where you can see now where these base transactions are being started on a daily and weekly basis. So that's a real quick overview of the formula base and forward contract based purchases. Now I'm going to change over and go over the National Weekly Direct Beef Type Distribution Report. This is a weekly report that we will release every Tuesday afternoon around 2 o'clock. And I, once again, have highlighted different parts of the reports with colors to hopefully make it a little bit easier to follow. But basically, we have this report broken up in a live basis and a dress basis. And I've got each purchase type highlighted by a different color to make it a little bit easier to follow. One thing to remember about this report compared to the formula base and forward contract based reports that we just touched on. All the cattle on this net price distribution report are net prices, or the price won't change. So negotiated cash, these trades are known and the price will not change. The rest of the transactions, the formula, forward contracts, and negotiated grid transactions are all net transactions where the cattle have been harvested, the price is established and is final. So basically each one of these columns is a comprehensive price for each purchase type. So for this example, a live comprehensive price on the negotiated cash trade will be $123.26. On the formula net purchases, the comprehensive price for formulas will be $124.29, and so forth. As you can see here on the left-hand side of the screen, we have some distribution groups broken up into $2 increments. So each one of these $2 increments represents the amount of cattle traded above or below a weighted average price. So in this example for negotiated cash, there's 10,909 head of cattle that traded upwards of within $2 above the 123 26, as well as 8,359 head of cattle that sold within $2 on the bottom side of this 123.26. And this is the same for the formula nets, forward contracts, and negotiated grid nets. As you can see here, there is a wide price spread. In this example, $12 under a weighted average price, all the way to $20 over a weighted average price on a live basis. So that will only get wider when I show you the dressed basis distribution. But basically, one thing you need to keep in mind here is just because cattle are $2 over in different purchase types does not necessarily mean that they are the same $2 over. What that means is that these 5,021 head of cattle that traded within $2 over on a formula basis are based off of the 124.29, and the 10,909 cattle on the negotiated side are based off of being $2 over that 123.26 on the cash side. But before I go any farther down in the dress section, I want to just kind of point your attention to what I've got highlighted here in the $2 distribution groups. As you can see, we have them broke up into $2 increments, and we go from $10 to $14 over, with the $12 distribution group missing. The reason for that is when we built this report, we made it dynamic. So if there's no cattle in that distribution group in that $2 range, basically is completely cut out. And the reason for this is we want to keep this report as short as possible. Our reports are long enough the way it is, and if there's no data there, we just wanted to get it out of the way so it's less to have to scan through. So now I'm going to move down to the dressed section. One thing I want to bring your attention to is, like I mentioned before, that we will have wider price spreads generally on a dress basis. And as you can see here, we have 95 head of cattle that traded on a formula net basis that are $30 under a weighted average price. So keep that in mind. We'll touch on that here in a second. As you can see, when we get down here, negotiated cash is the highest priced purchase type on this particular report, a little bit over $2, with negotiated grid nets getting close to $1.98, formulas at $196.68, and forward contracts a little bit over $1.91. The format's the same here as they are on the live side, where these $2 increments, each group of cattle for their purchase type fall into these respective categories. But one thing I want to touch on when we get down to the premiums is there are a lot of cattle that have quite a bit of premiums added to them, up to $48 over a weighted average price of that $196.68. So remember that price, we'll get to that in the next slide, all the way up to $60 over that weighted average. So we go from $30 under to $60 over for that price of $196.68. So another aspect we have of these reports to kind of see this information a different way is in these charts. On the live side, we have these charts in a volume by purchase type, so you can see where each purchase type and selling basis where they fall. As you can see here, the closer you get to par, the negotiated cash cattle are gathering a majority of that head count, with all other purchase types kind of spread out, making up those wide spreads. And this is even more evident when we go down to the dress basis, where we don't have necessarily a perfect bell curve, but you can see the tendencies of a bell curve. But you have these long tails, generally of formula transactions. There's our $60 over, all the way to our $30 under. So one thing to keep in mind, I touched on that $60 over and $30 under, that $196.68. Now I'm going to show you our current national weekly direct slaughter cattle report, and this is for formula and forward contract net transactions. We put this report out for several years, and this is the same data that we just looked at on the net price distribution report. So there is that $196.68 that I referenced for that weighted average price on your formula dress cattle. There's our price spread of, ranging from a little bit over $168 to almost $2 56. So here we get a high, a low, and a weighted average price. And the same data here, you can see it here where we've got our low, weighted average price, and our high here. It's just a different way of looking at the same data. So what are some takeaways of the net price distribution report? Well, one thing that this report does, it offers a more in-depth look at transactions in $2 increments. You can see where the cards fall on all these transactions versus just having a high and a low and a weighted average price. It allows you to compare purchase type transactions where you can see what cattle are bringing the most money in the current marketing condition, whether it be negotiated cash, formulas, forward contracts, or negotiated grids. And lastly, it just increases price transparency, where you just get a more in-depth look of the same data so you can see where those cattle fall and allow you more information to take in to make a marketing decision on your own behalf. So that's all I have on these two new reports. Thank you for having me. And at the end of this webinar, I'd be more than happy to take any questions you have.
Well, thank you, Charlie. That was a very interesting, in-depth look at the two new reports. I really appreciate you taking the time out of your afternoon and your busy schedule to put this information together. It's really interesting when you look at those reports, and I really liked how the net distribution report is laid out. It really, I think, shows the transparency of all the transactions that we receive through the LMR. With that, we did have a question come in, and I would, if you would mind, take a minute to answer this question. On the base report, it breaks out the purchase type from FOB and delivered. And as you can see, for delivered steers, the difference in FOB and the delivered is roughly $5. How are you supposed to look at the report distribution report when the FOB and the delivered are not broken out so that $5 of the distribution could that be just who pays the freight? Is that difference? Is that difference?
Yeah, that's a great question, Jody. And I think that's great feedback when people look at these reports. One thing to keep in mind about the net price distribution report, basically each one of those purchase types is a summary or comprehensive for each one of those respective purchase types. So that will grab all dressed FOB FOB or delivered purchases. So that basically is going to combine those prices together to give you an overview of the whole purchase type. Unfortunately, it won't break them out to show that difference. It's just giving you an overview of what that price is based on purchase type.
Okay. So another question that come in, is USDA going to release a weekly report by region rather than just national?
Are you talking on the formula-based reports?
Yes.
Yes, we will release a weekly formula-based report by region that will come out on Monday mornings, along with our other weekly reports.
Okay. We're getting several questions coming in. I'll go ahead and answer a couple more or ask a couple more, and then we'll move on to our next, and we'll pick up the rest of the questions that come in at the end of the session. The next question I would ask is, do you think that there will be a time that program cattle such as natural or grass-fed are broken out in the price distribution report?
That could be some of the feedback we've gotten already on the net distribution report are some of these high premiums, potentially all natural grass-fed cattle and so forth, and they could. So that's something that we could definitely look at down the road. Okay.
So with that, now when you showed that net distribution, we've seen that -30 and up to a +60. So that high premium that we're seeing, that +60 on the formula, could that be some of them natural or NHTC characteristic cattle already?
Yes, they could, as well as those sharp discounts. They could be for anything that is discounted a dark cutter over 30 months and so forth. So yes, that helps make up that wide range on the high and lows.
Okay, good deal. Well, I sure appreciate you taking the time to answer a few of these questions. In regards of time, we'll answer the questions that are coming in. I think people will have some more as they sit here and think about it, and we'll get back to you here at the end of the session. At this time, we're going to go ahead and move to our third speaker. Thank you very much, Charlie. So our third speaker tonight, or this afternoon, I should say, is Mr. Robert Eaton. Robert is a data officer in the AMS Livestock and Poultry Programs Office of the Deputy Administrator. Prior to his current role, Robert served as the Market News Reporting Supervisor in North and South Carolina. After serving some time with the Peace Corps, Robert began his USDA career as a shell egg grader and then as a grading supervisor. Robert is here to share with you an exciting new resource, the new USDA Carcass Grading Dashboard. Please welcome Mr. Robert Eaton.
Good evening. Thank you for the introduction, Jody, and I appreciate being part of this panel. Tonight, I'm going to demonstrate a tool that we in the Livestock and Poultry Program developed to provide market information, in this case, grade information, in a more user-friendly format to you, our customers. So I'm going to share my screen. On my screen is a steer and heifer estimated grading report. This is published every week by our program, showing beef grade information of prime, choice, and select grades gathered from our quality assessment division, who provides grading services throughout the country. Now, this report, like many others, provides extremely valuable information, but a challenge with it is that the information in it is static, meaning you can look at a snapshot in time, in this case 1 week, but you as a user can't alter this view to see different time frames. In this case, if I want to look at trends over time, I need to take reports for each week, pull out the data, and map it out using Excel or another program to look at these changes over time. So we in the Livestock and Poultry Program developed an estimated grading dashboard tool using this same information to put you as a user in control of what timeframes and what information you want to see, and graph it out so that information can tell a story of what's happening in the industry and allow you as a user to make informed decisions for your operation. Let me show you what I mean. This is a page within the dashboard providing a national view of grade data for beef, lamb, and veal. I'm going to focus on beef. The metrics at the top here of each graph show an aggregate head count and weighted average percentage over a selected time frame for each grade. By default, this is set to the most recent year. So for 2021, thus far, we've had 17.12 million head of cattle graded, with a corresponding breakdown in head counts by grade and percentage by grade. The grade information is also graphed out in the lines below, in this case, once again for 2021, and each week of information is a dot on the line. Choice is shown in a lighter color orange, prime, darker color orange, and select is in gray. If I want to look at a specific week and a specific grade line, I can hover over that time frame, in this case 1/23/21. I can see that my percentage of choice was 74%, and I had 372,000, nearly 373,000 head of cattle were graded as choice that week. Now here's where the truly beneficial value in this tool comes in. It's dynamic. You can adjust the time frames from 1 week all the way up to nearly 11 years and anything in between using the filters here at the top. In order to change the filters, I select a drop-down box and select the dates I want to view, and then hit apply. I'm going to select 10 years, 11 years worth of grade data here to take a look at that. So I select all, hit apply, and what's going to happen is it's going to bring a lot more information in here. As I can see now, I have 260 million head of cattle were graded, and my percentages changed substantially as well, because that's an average, a weighted average percent. The information here is telling a story, and what we're doing is unlocking that story to provide insight. And the story this tells is one of hard work by the American cattlemen and women who've consistently improved the quality of cattle through genetic selection and improved management practices. We'll take a look at this. We're running sub 60% choice in 2010. We're steadily low 70s, even getting close to the mid 70s on choice. Select moved from 32.5% down to 15.5%, even lower sometimes. Prime went from 3.2%. Right now we're at 8.5%. We're a seasonal low. But there are times here where in 2020 and 2021 we had 12% prime that overtook select. It's just impressive to see. It's a testament to our producers on improving beef quality so quickly and dramatically. So I got to say, well done, folks. I can't get over this enough. Every time I look at this, I think it's just impressive to me. We're also able to view this information at a regional and state level on this next tab, which I'll go to now. At the top, I have the same time frame filters, year, month, and week. I also have filters for different regions, FSIS regions, and states. And of course, I have the same metrics here at the top, and then a graph here on the right, and then a map here on the bottom left. Now, in order to filter into a specific location, I can either use the filters here at the top and select that location. I actually prefer to use the map. You can use the map as a filter. And in this case, I'll select regions 7 and 8. And I can do that just by clicking on the map. And if you watch these metrics, you watch the chart, the information will change to reflect that specific location. And I can see my prime percentage was pretty high here for a period of time. We're running 14%. In fact, I can hover over the graph and I can see this location's grade line percent compared to the national average, which was at this particular time was 11%. We were running 14% here for that same region. I can also select out of that, pull everything back out. It's going to pull out the national average. And if I wanted to, I could actually hover over here, click and drag, and I can select several different locations at one time to take a look at a weighted average, which that wasn't doable previously on the previous report. I also have the ability to select individual states, high volume states. And the reason we have just several states available, in this case it's Texas, Kansas, Nebraska, is to maintain company confidentiality. But we can show several states that are high volume production states. And to view that, there's a map selection here in the bottom left. I can select this and I can look at that Kansas, Nebraska, Texas state map. Selecting that is going to bring in my state map. And in this case, if I want to look at, say, Kansas, now these are colored based on the head that come through each of these individual states. And so Kansas is my highest producing state for this period of time. I can select Kansas and take a closer look, get more of a granular view of what's happening in this particular location. Once again, I can hover over a point in time and see how it compared to the national average. I had a pretty good spike here of choice in February of 21. And this tells you a story. Once again, this tells you a story. This could have been from the snowstorm that hit in February. Perhaps a plant or two were shut down, and then we had higher quality production. Perhaps cattle were fed a little longer because of that snowstorm. It's telling you something. It's something to be aware of. This is things you can use to make a decision. And that brings me to the point of what value does this have to you as a producer? Well, let's say you have a higher percent of prime or choice quality cattle than the regional or state average you're in. That's a negotiation point to stand on to get a better price for your cattle. And this information entails all of the cattle graded in the country, so it's providing a complete picture of what's happening in the industry. And as I said earlier, like this is telling us a story, and these grade lines are constantly changing, generally in an upward trend with fluctuations from seasonal trends and sometimes one-off events. So use this information. We're providing it for free for you to use to your advantage. We also built in additional pages if you wanted to download the data itself. I'm going to look at this beef grade percent page. Right now it's a national view. I can select using the filters different years. In this case, I'll pull out 2020, 2021. I can download that data using this download data button, hit the download button, and that's going to actually open up an Excel file showing that information. And so we have the ability to pull out, you have the ability to pull out that underlying data. So probably the next question you have is, how do I get here? How do I get to this location? Let me back out of this. The easiest way to get here, we have this located on several spots within our website, ams.usda.gov. Come in here. This is going to take you to our AMS page. That's really zoomed in, but so folks can see it. I have this located in several spots. It's on the grades and standards. If you go to beef, it's located there at the very top. I also have it on market news. So if I come into market news, this is probably where most of you are familiar with. Let's go to livestock, poultry, and grain. And I'm going to come in here at the very top. It says resources, livestock, veal, and lamb estimated grading dashboard. That's going to take you right in here to our landing page. And once you click on that link, you come to the landing page. Here we have an overview of this tool and purpose. We have a table of contents laying out each page. There's multiple pages within this dashboard. And then we also have tutorials. I went through some of these functions very quickly. If you have difficulty navigating, using filters, downloading the data, we have video tutorials to walk you through that. We also have a link here for questions or really comments. If you have questions on how to use a tool or comments on what you think about it, I'd love to hear it. We receive this directly. I do want to stress that you cannot break this tool, so don't be afraid. And if you do happen to get yourself stuck, hit this refresh button up here, or there's a refresh reset button down here. Either one of those will take you back to the default. You can change things around. Don't be afraid of it. Get in and try and take out what you need or what you want. Finally, I do want to say the response we've received from development of this tool has been very positive, and folks are asking, what's next? Well, we're developing more of these tools. In the near future, there will be enhancements to this dashboard to show more information, such as grade information shown on a week-over-week basis or month-over-month basis in a graph format to compare seasonal changes easier, and head counts graded over time. We're also working on an auction dashboard with report information such as feeder cattle prices, and we'll be working on a livestock mandatory dashboard as well. So there's more to come as this initiative is driven by you, the user. I did also want to mention briefly that this is available in a tablet or on a tablet or on a phone. And so you can use this on your desktop, tablet, phone, whatever works best for you. With that, I thank you for your time and open it up to any questions you may have. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Robert. I really appreciate you taking the time to walk us through that dashboard. I know a lot of times for myself, I go to looking for data and it can get a little overwhelming, and a dashboard of that magnitude will allow to, pretty user friendly and put it in a picture. And I think it really unlocked the story when you showed that graph of the grading percentage for 10 years, over the 10 years, and how we've increased the number of percentage of choice and how select has gone down and prime has gone up. And as you mentioned, that's a big testament to our American producers out there, cattle producers, and taking the advantage of improving genetics to optimize their profitability and take advantage of those premiums that are available for producing that high quality upper 2/3 type carcass. So with that, I have a question is, what I noticed on one of your slides, it said other grade, and you also show, prime choice and select, but can you explain a little bit of what other may entail?
Yeah, Jody, that's a good question. So on the dashboard and on the report, there's a category called other, and this really entails everything that was offered to grade, which didn't make it as prime choice or select. So this includes all the no roll cattle and really anything that was offered to grade that just didn't meet grade. And it entails a lot of like dark cutters and older cattle. It signifies a deficiency in quality. And one thing I didn't hit on is if you look back at 2010, 2011, we had about 5.25%. We're running nationally for the other category about 3% for 2021.
Okay, good deal. Another question that comes, and I think you kind of touched on this a little bit about downloading the bulk data. Is there a tutorial on how to do that?
There's a video tutorial in there on how to pull the data. And I know I just touched on that very briefly, but you can pull out the same information that's in the report. In fact, what I'm working on right now is an enhancement to this dashboard. There's more to come, but the enhancement to this will actually allow you to download not only the grade percent, but the head count as well. So you'll be able to get even a different picture, because that's taken, those percentages are taken from the number of head graded in each of those categories. So you'll be able to pull that out easily. And so there'll be some changes coming in the next couple of months. But in the meantime, there's a tutorial on walking anybody through how to do that. And if they have questions, feel free to reach out to me just using the contact us link at the bottom of the dashboard landing page.
Okay, perfect. Another comment and a question that came in, a great resource. I like to hear that. We're glad that some of the initiatives that we're taking, people are able to use them and they find them helpful. The question you had was, has there been discussion for future plans and by the agency to include some of the yield data and the carcass weight data?
That's a really good question. Actually, one I was kind of wondering if somebody was going to ask that. We have to separate these two data sets. This is taken from a voluntary program. This dashboard is taken from a voluntary program from our grading program. With the livestock mandatory reporting, that's a different data set. And two things we really have to be able to show something is complete data and accurate data. Now we have very accurate data with this data set that I'm using on this dashboard, but it doesn't entail all of the information for, say, yield grades or carcass weights. In fact, we only have about 10 to 15% of the carcass weights for the cattle that are graded, and that's because that information doesn't need to be readily provided to us for that service. It's a voluntary service. But what's coming is we will be working on pulling out some of the LMR, Livestock Mandatory Reporting data, and putting it into a dashboard format where we will be able to show some of those carcass weights, some of the yield grades. That information, it just wasn't in this data set completely. It was accurate, but it wasn't, we didn't want to show something that could be misleading to people. Mm-hmm. And so it will be coming. It's just not right now. I mean, we'll be working on it. Good question.
Okay, yeah, all very good questions, Robert. We sure appreciate your time and your effort and all the work that you have done and continue to do on a daily basis to make sure that we're taking all of this data that we provide in livestock and poultry programs and make it available to the stakeholders that use this information on a daily basis to help make marketing decisions and help facilitate marketing of cattle. With that, I want to go ahead and ask the other two speakers, Jim and Charlie, if they would join us, and we'll kind of go through some of the Q&A that come through the Q&A. We really appreciate everybody's attention tonight. We appreciate the questions, and we'll answer these the best we can until, as long as time allows. One question that I want to touch on, and I kind of saved this question, Robert, it's more kind of towards you, but I would like to get some input from the other panelists on this as well, especially Charlie, where he works in that live cattle reporting segment. But that question was, what's been the drivers for the increase in the choice and prime quality grade over the last 10 years? I know, Robert, you mentioned just, producers taking advantage of the, improved genetics. Is there any other things that you've heard or experienced that could be driving this?
I can kick it off and again push it over to Charlie or Jim, but really one of the big aspects is the improved genetics. Producers have been breeding cattle to be larger and better quality. I mean, that's the bottom line. Fix the bottom line. You've seen that change rapidly. It's incredible, actually. It's been happening for years, but you can actually really visually see that. And then improved management practices as well. That folks are really closely watching feed, the stress an animal undergoes. They're watching in the details that are going to create a better quality fed steer heifer, because that does affect the bottom line. And we do see those seasonal changes as well. I mean, you see in the springtime, my prime jumps up because it's a little cooler weather, and so there's some other factors like that as well. But those are the two things I really see, and I can let you elaborate a little bit more, Charlie or Jim.
Yeah, I can't really add much to that, Robert. That's a really great point you brought up. Just another thing to touch on is the consumer demand for beef has been through the roof. Everyone has a good eating experience now with beef. They're bringing back good demand, as domestically as well as internationally, and the producers, like you said, have seen that, and with genetics and good practices have really answered the call in that regard.
Very good. Jim, do you have anything to add to that?
No, I think both of them have well explained the fact that the industry has identified products that the consumer wants, and the producers are focusing their production efforts in that area.
Yes, I agree. Appreciate you all three touching on that. I know that over the years, the premiums and discounts, Charlie, that we talked about and you alluded to, and we've seen that spread. There's some premiums out there for them higher quality cattle. So some feeding practices, feeding cattle longer, et cetera, is aided in that as well. So, all right, well, let's move on for the sake of time. The next question that I'm going to ask, I'm going to direct this question to Charlie because it's centered around your premiums and also your formula base report. Is there a way to compare the formula base report to I guess it's report number LMCT 151? I'm not sure exactly what the title of that report is, and come up with a premium to the base amount if one is a purchase report and one is a post-harvest report. So there would be a lag between when cattle are included on each report. Is that correct? Can you elaborate?
Yeah, you could definitely do that. I think the official title of the LMCT 151, obviously us market reporters, we use slug numbers to identify everything, but that's the National Weekly Direct Slaughter Cattle Report. It'd be the formula and forward contract price. That includes net prices. So that is net to the producer of what the producer was paid after all premiums and discounts have been applied, the cattle have been harvested, and the check has been cut and payment has been made. So you could compare that report, that's a net report, and compare that to our new national weekly direct slaughter cattle report, but it'll be a formula-based purchases and forward contract purchases. You could pull that data through our data mart, database, and compare those over time, so you could see the difference between the base and the net. Obviously, there's going to be some lag time between when those cattle are harvested and reported. By the time cattle are chilled down, they go through regrades, and all the data is finalized. But we also do something similar to that on the National Fed Cattle Comprehensive Report that comes out on Tuesday afternoons. However, that is comparing formula bases and nets on a 52-week rolling average. So you could do either or to come up with a picture of the premium from a base to a net.
Okay. Well, I'm sure if anyone would like to visit with you more on that and have some help on how to view that data, you'd be more than glad to help them. All they got to do is call you. Isn't that right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah. I know you, Charlie, well enough, and you love talking about this data. So want to encourage participants, if you do have questions, reach out to Charlie, and he'll definitely take the time to explain to you the in-depth version of that report. The next question that came in kind of centered around the regionals. Where does Iowa fall for the Corn Belt in the reports, east or west?
Iowa would be included in the Western Corn Belt, and in the 5 area, we define the Western Corn Belt is Iowa and Minnesota combined as states to make up one region.
Okay. Perfect. And then we had one more question, and that question is, on the weekly report, the forward cattle contract in the price that was actually received for cattle were harvested. Is that correct?
Yes and no. It depends on what report you're looking at. The new National Weekly Direct Slaughter Cattle for formula base and forward contract purchases, those would be base prices. That's where the price is locked in and your transaction begins. But the LMCT 151, which we referred to earlier, that would just be the National Weekly Direct Slaughter Cattle report for formula and forward contracts. Those are net prices, and those would be cattle that have been harvested and a net price has been established.
Okay, very good explanation at that, and I really appreciate you explaining that in a little more clear for our audience. At this time, we haven't received any more Q&A in the Q&A section. So we really appreciate everyone taking the time to join us tonight. Like we mentioned earlier, if you have any questions, we ask that you reach out to Charlie or reach out to Jim, or if you have questions on the dashboard, reach out to Robert, and they would be more than glad to walk you through that. So anyways, again, I'd like to express our gratitude to our speakers and their expertise this afternoon. We'd like to thank everybody who took the time out of their busy schedule to participate in the webinar. I hope you are learning something new from these webinars. I truly hope this webinar has moved you to learn more about the resources USDA provides to support the U.S. cattle producers. We ask that you please take a moment to complete our participation survey. You can use the QR code you see here on the screen in the upper left. You can hold your camera phone up to it, and then that will open up the survey. You will also be receiving a follow-up email. This feedback helps us to continue to plan learning opportunities and events with our Cattle Carcass Training Center partners. This particular event was a reciprocal of the surveys that we received from our webinar that we hosted back in June. One last reminder that tonight or this afternoon's webinar will be available. It was recorded and will be available on our USDA website, shown here in the upcoming days. Also, please take the time to go to the Cattle Carcass Training website. You can see all the resources that are available from our previous webinars, also announcements of additional webinars or in-person events if and when we are able to start hosting those as well. And along with that, you can also sign up for a Gov delivery email that will automatically alert you when we are hosting a cattle carcass training event. Also, if you're interested, in October, we'll be hosting a series of 3 webinars focusing on LMR reports and other USDA market data available for the pork industry. Information about that series will be announced this week. In fact, it was announced today, and you can check the AMS website for details, or feel free to contact me for details. We sure enjoy everybody taking the time to participate and watch tonight. I hope everyone has a great evening. Take care and enjoy your fall.